obviously, they've talked about cutting rates and they've pushed it off. Now they're talking maybe June. Could be later than that, could be September. I personally believe that there's going to be some type of a negative event which will force them to cut rates. That will smoke the dollar. And at some point in time, in my mind, the Fed is going to have to raise rates to protect the dollar. They either raise rates or they lose the dollar. A banana republic back in the 80s and 90s was any country that got to the point where they had 100% debt to GDP ratio. The US right now is 130% debt to GDP.
The term banana republic has been used to describe politically and economically unstable countries since it was first coined in 1904. In the past, the phrase was used when referring to the most exploited countries globally, but today, it is an almost perfect description of the world's superpower and issuer of the reserve currency. According to Bill Holter, a popular precious metals broker and analyst, the United States ticks off the two boxes that describe a banana republic. First, the country's debt-to-GDP ratio has reached a terrifying 130%, a level that has sealed the fate of over 50 countries in the past 200 years. According to renowned macro analyst Lyn Alden, over the past 2 centuries, 51 out of 52 countries that reached sovereign debt levels of 130% of GDP ended up defaulting within 0 to 15 years, either through devaluation, inflation, restructuring, or outright nominal default. Despite the growing risks, our debt levels, rather than slowing down, are increasing ever more rapidly. The United States is now adding $10 billion of debt every day, about $1 trillion in 100 days, and this figure is expected to grow even bigger in the coming years. According to Holter, another factor that makes the US a banana republic is the extreme political divide and instability across the country. The US political scene has been reduced to a complete joke over the past 2 years, and it's clear that we are heading in a very wrong direction. Holter recently made an appearance on Silver Bullion TV, during which he talked about the precious metals industry, the US economy, the impending banking sector crisis, and how it is all a prelude to central bank digital currencies. We will now present clips from Holter's interview, but before we do, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
Well, I think it's probably supply oriented. We've seen a premium in Shanghai of $30 to $50 an ounce over COMEX and LBMA for the last, 4, 5, 6 months. And it's a clean arbitrage. So what's happening is inventory is moving from west to east, and I think that's finally beginning to really tighten the supply in the west. And if demand even stays the same and supply shrinks, you'll see higher prices. So I think that's what you're seeing is the arbitrage is finally starting to take effect. You've seen a rally over the last month or 2 months. You've got gold now at what, 2150 or thereabouts. It's a clear breakout. Wouldn't surprise me if we traded back down to 2070, 2080, test the breakout level and then take off. Once this gets rolling, silver is going to be gold on steroids. I do want to add one thing. We've seen over the last probably 6 months, and even longer actually, we've seen the amount of gold supposedly held by GLD, by some of the ETFs. We've seen their position shrink. It's continually shrunk. And it's my opinion, if you read the prospectuses on a lot of these ETFs, they don't have to hold physical gold. They claim to hold X amount of ounces. My question is, are they real ounces or are they synthetic ounces? And my thought process is they understand what's going on behind the scenes. And I think what you're seeing is a closeout, if you will, of some of the games that they were playing. And that has affected the inventories of some of these ETFs. They're starting to dry up. So, I don't have any direct evidence of that, but my sniffer tells me that a lot of this gold is synthetic, and as they're unwinding some OTC positions, the long side obviously has to go also. So whether the long side is real or whether it's synthetic, I'm not 100% positive, but I think the inventory numbers for years have been fabricated. You mentioned solar demand. The Silver Institute just came out with numbers of 1.2 billion ounces of demand, and the supply we know is just a shade under a billion ounces per year. So that's showing a deficit. But I think the Silver Institute numbers are way incorrect because there was well over 300 million ounces used just in solar. So, if you add in the other uses and investment demand for silver, I suspect the deficit is way more than 300 million ounces.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has been expressing increasingly dovish sentiments about interest rates. About 2 weeks ago, while testifying before the House Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee, the Fed chair noted that the Federal Open Market Committee is optimistic that inflation will keep trending down to their 2% target. As such, Powell stated the FOMC is open to lowering interest rates in June. At the conclusion of the FOMC's March meeting, Powell made similar comments while communicating the committee's decision to leave rates unchanged. According to the Fed chair, the central bank is sticking with its forecast for 3 interest rate cuts in 2024, as long as there is further confirmation that inflation is moving closer to the central bank's 2% target. During his interview, Holter notes that the Fed has no choice but to lower the Fed funds rate, regardless of what inflation does in the coming months. He adds that it would be a choice between salvaging what's left of the dollar by slashing rates or keeping rates high and causing further damage to the greenback. According to the precious metals broker, the coming banking sector crisis will present an opportunity for the central bank to slash rates without regard for inflation and probably even enforce a central bank digital currency. Let's get back to the interview.
Well, obviously, they've talked about cutting rates and they've pushed it off. Now they're talking maybe June, could be later than that, could be September. I personally believe that there's going to be some type of a negative event which will force them to cut rates. That will smoke the dollar. And at some point in time, in my mind, the Fed is going to have to raise rates to protect the dollar. They either raise rates or they lose the dollar.
I mean, if you don't mind sharing, what range of events do you see possibly coming down?
Oh, no, that's a crazy question. In today's world, and let's add in the fact that this is an election year, and the polls really look like Biden and the left are going to get absolutely smoked. And it's my opinion that there's less than a 50-50 chance that there's even going to be an election because I don't think they have the ability to cheat enough to retain power. So out of fear of jail time, there's going to be some type of, more than likely, a false flag man-made event. When you're asking me, what could it be? Throw a dart at 100 dots and whatever dot the dart lands on. I mean, who knows? But there's just so many potentials out there at this point to break the system. I would never speculate as to what the event will be. A banana republic is defined in 2 ways. One, and this goes back to when I was in school or getting out of school, 30, 40 years ago. A banana republic back in the 80s and 90s was any country that got to the point where they had 100% debt to GDP ratio. The US right now is 130% debt to GDP. So from a mathematical standpoint, we're already at that definition. And the sad thing is the dollar is the world's reserve currency. So you have a banana republic that's issuing the currency. Then on the other side, the other part of a definition for a banana republic is when the rule of law breaks down. And I mean, you can't go an hour or 2 hours without reading, more and more bullshit as far as arrests, indictments, etc. The rule of law is broken down, and the current administration is using the Department of Justice as a battering ram. They're using it as a weapon. The narrative is what they're trying to say is that the big banks are healthy and it's the smaller banks that are having a problem. And obviously, and this is related to coming out with a central bank digital currency, it would be way easier to do a CBDC with only, say, 5, 10, 15 big banks and everything else folded up under those big banks. If you try to do a CBDC with 5 or 10,000 various banks out there, that said, they're telling you that the big banks are healthy and it's the smaller banks that are not. And that's not the case. If you look at the numbers, I think, what is it? 4 banks have over $4 trillion in commercial real estate exposure. Now, why are their loans any better than the loans on a smaller bank? They're not. And on top of that, you've got, huge derivatives within the big banks that the small banks don't have. So in my opinion, the small banks are nowhere near as much in trouble as the big banks.
Both the infamous regional banks and the supposed too-big-to-fail banks are in jeopardy. Hundreds of U.S. lenders have both high levels of commercial real estate exposure and large unrealized losses from the higher rates, which means they either have to seek fresh capital, merge, or risk a bank run when depositors realize what's happening. This presents a fresh quagmire for U.S. regulators, struggling to keep the crisis from boiling over to stop a massive crisis that threatens many core sectors of the United States. However, experts like Holter believe they can only delay this crisis, not stop it. Someday, when the stakes become too high, it will boil over, and there will be no stopping the damage to the economy. Do you share Bill Holter's sentiments about the economic and political situation in the United States and believe that a crisis is inevitable? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notifications bell for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.